Hi everyone, welcome to Studio Jake. This is the second episode of season 2, kicking off with the new year here at 2019. Be sure to like this video, share it out, subscribe to Studio Jake, and also ring that little bell because YouTube's doing this weird thing where they're curating your subscriptions. So be sure to ring the bell, that way you get notifications. And we're going to be when I say we, I've got my first guest of the new year, and she is Lauren Chen. You know her as the Blaze's roaming millennial, although she was roaming millennial way before CRTV and the Blaze. But she's a really popular YouTuber, and she is also a writer for EV Magazine, which I highly recommend. It's a good alternative to all the trash like InStyle and Cosmopolitan. Fun fact about Lauren, she was also featured in my top 50 kick butt women to follow on Twitter. So go check that out on my blog as well. Lauren, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me, and thank you for the wonderful introduction, and thank you for featuring my Twitter account. If you are someone who follows me on Twitter, I am sorry that you're exposed to all of my ramblings, but I do appreciate it.
And one of the reasons I'm having roaming on is I go back and forth because when I first met her, she was roaming, and then
You
now she's Lauren. And so forgive me if I use those interchangeably. But she has written this really great piece in EV Magazine, and I believe it is, I can't remember the exact title, but it's Why is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is cool and conservatives are not. I kind of disagree a little bit with the example. I think that conservatives kind of blow AOC a little bit out of proportion, but her piece kind of moved me in that other direction where I'm kind of starting to see the light a little bit. So I wanted to have her on and talk about this. So for those unfamiliar with your piece, could you just give like a basic rundown of it and what you learned from researching and writing it?
Yeah, so Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, obviously, since last year, she has just been everywhere. The mainstream media loves her. She's gotten a lot of screen time, and it's funny because it seems like as much as the left and establishment, at least in terms of media, love her, conservatives, the right, they hate her just as much. And you know what? Listening to her talk, looking at her policies, I don't blame people for being critical of her. We absolutely should be critical. Some people have taken my piece as saying, oh no, don't attack her at all, just leave her alone. That's not what I was trying to say. But I fear that in trying to go after her so harshly, a lot of people on the right have essentially turned her into the left's version of Trump, i.e., anything she says or does, regardless if it's related to policy, we can just go after her. We can kind of turn her into a joke about how we shouldn't be taking her seriously. And that's all well and good. And even though I may agree with that position, I think we also really need to be mindful that that is exactly what the left said about Trump in 2016. And look what happened. He won the Electoral College in a landslide, and it's very likely he's going to win 2020 again. It was just kind of a caution for conservatives to, I guess, stop trying the method of attacking, let's say, her wardrobe or her savings account, the neighborhood that she grew up in, because I think we've seen that's not really been successful, and actually I think it causes sort of a Streisand effect in that it backlashes and ends up just skyrocketing her to even more popularity. So I would very much like it if, when we're critiquing her, we could try to stay focused on things like her policies, like her lack of experience, that type of thing. Because if we're trying to just go off of street cred alone, which unfortunately so many millennial voters do, she has more of it than conservatives do. And with the title "Why AOC is Cool and Conservatives Aren't," that's not based. I've had a lot of conservatives say, "Hey, I don't think she's cool. I find people like Ben Shapiro cool and Thomas Sowell, they're cool." I personally agree with that, but I mean, as right wingers, the fact is we are not the majority in popular culture, and we ourselves don't get to decide who the mainstream considers cool or not. And unfortunately, someone like AOC, for all of her faults, is what is cool at the moment, not conservatives.
Well, it is kind of true. I agree with you a little bit, and I know this is kind of a poor example, but Senator Patrick Leahy, who is a Democrat, he's not quite what the Democrats want. He obviously not as young as say Beto O'Rourke, and yes, I did that on purpose, and AOC, but he has been in, I believe, 4 Batman films. He was in Batman Forever, don't know why, but he was, The Dark Knight, The Dark Knight Rises, and Batman versus Superman. And he's a huge Batman fan. And I look at your article kind of only seemed to confirm my bias a little bit, because my big complaint with one of the reasons why my blog focuses so heavy on anime and film, and in this channel I talk about Star Wars and Gotham and things like that, is because there is a deficiency in conservatism when it, or I won't even say deficiency, there's like an, whenever conservative, especially what I call the preppy conservatives, when they hit popular culture, they just want to go, get that away from me. But definitely AOC and Robert Francis O'Rourke has tapped into that a little bit, and with a couple of exceptions, like people like you and me, who aren't policymakers, we're tapping into pop culture a little bit. You did a fantastic review of Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 on Roaming Media, which is your other YouTube channel. And, you know, I think that has something to do with it too. So do you agree with that assessment, or what do you think?
No, for sure. And what's frustrating is that as someone who's conservative on the right, I talk to a lot of, I guess, older commentators and things like that. And often what I get from people who are either right leaning or libertarian is that, we need to stop focusing so much on who cares what actors say, which, I agree. And I've made those same arguments, and like, oh, it's just ignore pop culture. They can do their own thing. We need to, like, it's all about the ideas. And don't get me wrong, ideas are so important. They're what's going to ultimately, I guess, propel conservatism into the future. But at the same time, if we're dealing with an entire generation of, let's say, millennials or even Gen Z people who, they're absorbed into popular culture, their ideas are being shaped by popular culture, you can't just approach someone who's had more than a decade of MTV and Comedy Central, Stephen Colbert, Jon Stewart, whoever the guy is that's currently hosting The Daily Show. Gosh, what's his name?
Trevor Noah.
Trevor Noah, yeah. Someone who's just been bombarded with these types of speakers, and then, try to throw Thomas Sowell at them or something like that, or John Locke, and think, there you go, now you can be a conservative, because it doesn't work like that. And I think one of the reasons why young people are so, especially among our generation, so left-leaning right now is because they have been indoctrinated by popular culture and academia. So conservatives, I think, in the past have really made a mistake in overlooking those types of media. And I'm someone who thinks that not everything needs to be political, and certainly, like, when I approach movies, it's not from I'm not assuming that it's just some piece of lefty propaganda out to brainwash me, therefore I must hate it. But I think people who overlook the importance of popular culture in politics and social issues are being very, very short-sighted. So I think conservatives are actually starting to wake up to that and be a little bit more savvy.
Yeah, and it's true. I hope it changes, because like Sonny Bunch, I'm sorry to name drop a little bit, but he is the worst movie reviewer ever. He just all his movie reviews, particularly about superhero movies, are just awful. And then now David French did counter this, but the National Review, they released a movie review. I can't remember the guy's name, but he called Aquaman an ear shiv to your senses, and I'm like, okay, take it down a little bit. Aquaman is not the end of Western civilization. In fact, Atlantis, which is where DC Comics got the idea for Aquaman, is a Western Greek myth, which for some reason we all like Greek philosophy on the conservative side. But I see things like that, and I go, this is why we can't get anywhere in the popular culture, because we want to dodge that, and I think that has something to do with it. Now, do you see anyone on the right, like who has, shall we say, potential as a lawmaker to kind of reach that level? I know Morgan Mortaugh, who is running in San Diego. I wish I lived in San Diego, because I would have voted for her. She was really social media savvy, or is she is very social media savvy. San Diego being blue, she unfortunately lost, not by a whole lot, but I was really looking forward to seeing someone like that on the right go to Congress. And I'm just curious, do you see anyone like that on the right who's maybe rising in the ranks or waiting in the wings, as far as that kind of pop culture savvy?
For sure. Well, I think Dan Crenshaw is someone who I'm very excited about. Firstly,
Definitely.
he is in office now, and he's someone who I think is not only good on policy. He's like a solid fiscal conservative, but he actually, I don't know if you saw the whole thing with Saturday Night Live, the guy who was engaged to Ariana Grande, whose
All
name I
right. Yes, that was a great. I did watch that bit. He
yeah.
was funny
So
in it.
yeah, exactly. I think he handled that perfectly. And I think, people are going to attack conservatives. They're going to say mean things, whatever. The worst thing we could do is always present ourselves as the party of downers and no fun and I can't take and so I think what he did there was amazing. He was very big about it. He ended up going on the show. They had a nice moment where they kind of poked fun at each other. I think that was perfect. And he's also someone who's very engaged on social media. I follow him on Twitter. He has an amazing amount of Twitter engagements anytime he posts something. He's young, he's a service member. All in all, I think he's kind of like the complete package in a lot of ways. He has an eye patch. I mean, he's come on, what more
All
could you
right.
ask for? So he I think is someone who's very savvy and I guess the more sensible, rational, smart person's version of a young up and coming representative rather than someone like AOC.
And one thing too about the whole thing with Dan Crenshaw and Saturday Night Live was he handled it so classy as well. It wasn't like he just, he didn't throw, because on the right we tend to either not say anything, ignore the problem, or throw temper tantrums. But I felt when I believe Pete Davidson, when
Yes.
he went after him on, I believe, I can't remember if it was Weekend Report or one of their skits. Dan Crenshaw's response was to be classy and just say, "Hey, it was a joke. It was a bad joke, but I'm not going to be offended by it." And I really think that that didn't give the left an opportunity to go, "Oh, we can get him because he's just being whiny and and doing what the right does." And so I think that was he handled that very well. And I think I also want to throw out Ted Cruz, who beat Jimmy Kimmel at basketball. I thought that was and apparently Jimmy Kimmel still has hard feelings about that, but that I think he maybe has learned from 2016 and he's catching on a little bit as well. You can see it with the Wolverine type beard he has going on. Are you pro beard or anti beard? I'm a
I
little
was
curious
just
about
gonna say I'm mixed about all of these beards that are going around. Didn't like it on Paul Ryan. I don't like it on Ted Cruz. I think from last week we all learned that Ben Shapiro with a beard is not everybody's cup of tea. I like clean shaven, so I mean
I
I'll
can't
just
say anything. I could get in trouble, so I'm not going to say anything about the beard, the Ben Shapiro beard.
yeah.
But where it comes to AOC, what do you think the right should do in response? Do you think, like, I personally think that we should just ignore her and let her dig her own grave? That seems to happen a lot on the left. She may be too much of a presence to let that happen. Should the response be to keep piling on as we've seen some on the right do? What do you think our response to her should be?
Well, what's interesting is that as you've kind of watched her evolve, she was someone who was getting a lot of attention right from the start. But her story is interesting because as far left as she is, she's also pretty anti-establishment, which,
Mhm.
as we know, the Democrats don't really like that. They may say that they're anti-establishment, but they're really not. If we're looking at the rank and file Democrats, people like the Clintons, like Nancy Pelosi, Harry Reid, these are establishment people who are fixtures of DC.
Right.
So we see that when she started out, she immediately started out by beating out an incumbent Democrat. So
Right.
that right there is already maybe a touchy subject. And then as soon as she's now in office, she's already kind of starting little tiffs and being very critical of other Democrats. We've seen other Democrats who've been interviewed about her saying that she needs to kind of learn how things work. She's new, blah, 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 blah. So I think that there may already be kind of problems forming within her own party for her, in which case
Mhm.
people on the right just kind of need to sit back and let things happen. Aside from that, she says a lot of silly stuff. She really, really does. Her ideas are just awful. I know when she was running before she was elected, I actually went through her platform. She believes in a federal jobs guarantee. There are so many things wrong with that. Her
Mhm.
the the Green New Deal. I mean, she wants us to be like on alternative energy sources in 10 years. Like where does the
Wow.
infrastructure, where does that technology come from? She can't tell us. So there are really, really good reasons why we should be, critical of her. I think we just need to keep in mind that when people perceive someone as being bullied, they will they're the underdog effect will kick in and they'll stick up for them. So I think we just need to be careful that our criticisms of her don't kind of seep into that bullying sphere, which is, why people end up supporting people like Melania or Ivanka or even Donald Trump himself so much when the mainstream media do it to them. We just need to be careful that we're not doing the same thing to her.
And
Also, it's
I've got to,
another reason.
yeah, that's absolutely right. And I've got to get what, because we've seen another Democrat attempt to kind of pop into social media, our own Elizabeth Warren, the last of the Mohicans herself. And I'm just curious what I watched her video that she did. I'm gonna grab a beer, and it was so cringeworthy. Like I don't even know what to say, and I'm just curious what was your reaction to this video?
Right. Well, because, the past, was it maybe few weeks, we've seen the evolution of streaming congressmen, which is now the new trendy thing to be. I think AOC started it all. She was doing that like live Q&A and she was like eating like I think it was microwavable mac and cheese with a coffee stir or something. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, she's so relatable. I do that. I don't know. As an adult, I have cutlery personally, but whatever. So then, of course, when we've now seen the new incarnation of that, which is Elizabeth Warren, like us fellow young people, just having a beer in her kitchen, regular working Joe, and then of course Beto O'Rourke is now on Instagram Live during his dental cleaning. So this is quite the time to be alive. I think this is all about
I
trying
think that hurt him, by the way. I think that no one likes to go to the dentist. So I think that did hurt him a little bit. Not enough to destroy him or whatever, but I think that hurt him just a wee bit.
Right, because the thing with, like, all of these things is they're kind of cringy when you think about it, but at least AOC, everything she does is pretty genuine. She seems like
Yeah.
a genuine person. She's not contrived. Like, she actually is a young millennial, and it seems like this is a regular thing to do for her. Whereas you look at the older people, I think Beto might still be a millennial, but he's definitely on the older side of things, and then Elizabeth Warren is just its own. Like, that feels contrived from them. It's not natural. So I mean, they're doing these things to try and connect with young voters, but young voters absolutely see through them. I mean, it's kind of like in those old TV shows from the
Mhm.
80s or 90s. Like you can spot a narc really,
Right.
really easy. That's kind of how they look, I think, to most millennials.
Yeah, and I guess we'll just have to wait to see, like you said, where we're going to come from on the right with this. And I have a feeling that social media is going to become a normal part of politics. And I have a family member who is a boomer, and he's a Republican, and he hates the idea of social media in politics. When Trump was using Twitter, he was like, he should just do interviews like every other. And I said, no, I like the fact that he's on Twitter. I'm like, I don't like everything he says on Twitter, but it's great. I remember there's this scene in Downton Abbey where they bring a radio into the house for the first time and they hear the king's voice, and they're like, oh, it makes him feel like he's reaching out to us. And I imagine when it comes to politicians, whether it be Dan Crenshaw, Ted Cruz, or Donald Trump, I imagine it makes us feel like, oh wow, they're actually a part of our lives. And one of the reasons Ted Cruz, by the way, is getting so many plugs is because he shared one of my Daily Wire articles. So I'm like his #1 fan right now. But anyway, do you see that like that's going to become social media is going to become just a normal part of politics?
Well, I think for better or worse, that's the reality that we're living in. And I think already in the 2016 election, especially when we're looking at the Trump campaign, they were huge on social media, right? I mean, Kellyanne Conway, like the whole Facebook game that they were playing, I think played a really large part in Trump eventually winning. And I mean, we're talking about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, like her live streams, but really Donald Trump is the original social media politician, right? His Twitter
Mhm.
is legendary. I'm like you. I love that he's using it. I'm not crazy 100% about everything that he tweets, but overall, I think It is a really great way for politicians who, whether they're on the left or the right, people are going to be twisting what they're saying to be able to give their direct message to the people they're trying to talk to their constituents, to the general public. It's really, really useful. Um, I don't see a way that it could be avoided. And I think people who say, oh no, they need to stick to interviews, blah, blah, blah. I mean, there's not really much point to that anymore anyway, because when they're doing that, they're always kind of subjecting themselves to someone else's platform, to someone else's editorialism. Whereas if it's social media, especially their own platform, they have total free reign. It's like recently with Trump's immigration address, we had the mainstream media debating, oh, are we even going to show it? I don't know, which is funny because, I mean, when it comes to Melania's shoes, they won't shut up about it, but an actual presidential address about immigration and this huge issue, don't know if we're gonna air it, whatever. But guess what? Trump has extremely large social media platforms. He can just air it wherever he wants. Like it's not really up to them what gets seen anymore. So ultimately, I think it's a good thing in the long run. In the shorter term, does that unfortunately mean we must be subjected to Beto O'Rourke's teeth cleaning appointments? I guess so. But ultimately, I do think it's a positive thing.
All right. Well, it is now time for the curveball question. This is where, for those of you unfamiliar with StudioJake, whenever I interview a guest, I always ask them a curveball question at the end of the interview, and it's just for fun. It's not a gotcha. It's just strictly for a good time. So, roaming millennial, when did you, and be honest, when did you actually give up your MySpace accounts?
Ooh. I don't actually remember. I definitely had one for sure. I don't know how long I kept with it though. I might okay, like I'm trying to think of the people who I had because I remember we used to be able to like rank our friends, which is really messed up when you think about it. You could like show like your best friends on your page and
It was
stuff.
all my family.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of the people who I had on that so I could remember who I left off and like or what time of my life that was. I think that was when I was about 14. I think that was like 10 years ago, honestly.
Mhm.
I'm gonna go with around then.
Okay, all right. That's
Thought
a
about
good
MySpace
honest
in a
thing.
long
I was like one of the last holdouts. I was because I actually still kind of don't like Facebook.
I
But just all my friends jumped over, and I was like, okay, it's time to make the transition. And I never. It's funny because if their servers ever got out, I would be very embarrassed because I entered like 3 of their film contests, and all those really lame short films are all on those MySpace servers somewhere.
oh, I think we would all be very embarrassed by our old MySpace profiles. I remember like trying to search for like the perfect, like you could change your backgrounds and like in these
Mhm.
horrible
That's why
early,
I liked it. It was customizable.
yeah. Oh gosh, that would be very cringy. I would hate to see the like the photo albums that were on mine.
Oh, absolutely. Roaming, thank you so much for coming on. Of course, you can follow her at Roaming Mill. I've got it on my line. That's her on Twitter. And where else can people find you?
You can also search for me on YouTube, either by Lauren Chen or Roaming Millennial. I'll pop up for both. Twitter, like you said, at Roaming Mill, and also Instagram at Roaming Millennial. Millennial is 2 L's and 2 N's, and I think that's pretty much everywhere.
All right. And of course, you can find me on Twitter at RealJacobAry. My Instagram is real.jacob.airy. My Facebook is author Jacob Airy because I have a book coming out. So I'm pretty excited about that. And let's see where else. Oh, dailywire.com. I write daily articles for, I call them my columns, but they're not really columns. And of course, you can find me on Twitter. I already said Twitter at RealJakeBerry. Be sure to subscribe here at Studio Jake and check out my blog, jacobairy.blog. Thank you again, Roaming, for coming on. I really appreciate it. And I'll see everyone next time right here on Studio Jake.